I'm getting so tired. I'm getting so.
Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. Have y'all ever heard the story about the man in the boat? You know, it's about God, right? Where there's this man in the boat, right? And he's stranded out at sea. You know, and he prays and he asks God to, you know what I'm saying, to save him, right? So on 3 different occasions, God sent somebody in a boat, he sent somebody in a plane, and all different types of things, right? But the moral of the story is that God's sending somebody to him to rescue him, right? And he tells each one of them that comes to him that, you know, I'm waiting on God, I'm waiting on God, I'm waiting on God, right? And then the boat capsizes, he drowns, he goes to heaven, and he asks God what happened. And God said, I sent you some help. You know what I'm saying? Now, this story is about this dude, right? His name is Ralph. Now, Ralph is that type of dude that he just always seems to mess it up. Always. But he talks about his belief system and all of this type of stuff, right? And a lot of people be talking out of both sides of the mouth when they're talking about they believe in God, but they want to be doing this dirt. You feel what I'm saying? And they somehow twist it up to where, you know, they think that they want you to believe, or they believe themselves that God is helping them get away with what they're doing, right? But that's a lie. God ain't got nothing to do with nothing like that. Nothing like that at all. God gives us sovereignty over our decisions, and what that means is you get to decide what it is you want to do, and you got to live with the consequences and the rewards of that. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that, right? He lays a blueprint out for us. You decide. You decide. If you're going down the highway, you on I-95, and you got them bricks in the trunk, God ain't got nothing to do with it if you get through that roadblock. Don't think that. Don't think that. None at all. None at all. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. This particular brother here, Ralph went on a caper one night. He got a best friend. Best friend. You know what I'm saying? Named Muhammad. Now, Muhammad, you know, he come from a different background, you know what I'm saying? And he was raised Muslim, and he knew, you know what I'm saying, from his belief system, he ain't had no business doing that. But he was young too, and he was out in the streets. And his parents, they thought that Ralph was, you know what I'm saying, a decent little kid and all this and that, right? Even though he had a different belief system, but they didn't mind them hanging out together. They didn't mind at all. Not at all. And Ralph's parents were the same way. They were the same way. Now, don't get it twisted. They were like lower middle class. They wasn't middle class or upper middle class. They were lower middle class. They were working class people. They struggled for what they wanted, but they worked hard. And they did everything they could to make Ralph's and Muhammad's life better. They did everything that they could. But see, sometimes, you know, you have kids that, and this happens, y'all. This happens. Whether you anywhere from 13 and 14 all the way up to 18, right? You have kids that don't appreciate the struggle that their parents are going through, trying to provide a better option for them, you know what I'm saying, later on in life. So they decide they want to take matters into their own hands and do some things that they see a lot of the other kids in the neighborhood are doing, you know, getting a little money here and there, little side hustles, right? But back in the day, we ain't talking about no side hustles like doing Uber or Uber Eats or none of that. We ain't talking about that. We're talking about hustling, getting money in the streets, right? But see, everybody's not cut out for that either. Everybody's not cut out for that. But here's the thing. See, some people, and Ralph and Muhammad were those people. They would like to sit and watch everybody else go out there and scrape and scramble and get it, and then they'd like to go take it. They were robbers, y'all. Stick-up kids. Yeah. And see, in this particular neighborhood that they lived in, right, they had a lot of businesses. It wasn't Chase Manhattan or nothing like that, right? But in this area, you had a lot of small business owners that they knew and knew them and all this and that. And everybody was struggling to make this community a better place. But you had people in the neighborhood. And don't get it twisted, Rafi Muhammad wasn't the only one, but you had other people in the neighborhood, and the crime was kind of elevated, not because the people in the area were bad, don't get it twisted. It's because the people that ran the city didn't care what was going on in that neighborhood, so the people in that neighborhood had to fend for themselves, right? And they weren't taking nothing. They weren't taking no shorts. If they knew you or didn't know you, come up in their place of business playing them games, they gonna deal with you. Because if they don't deal with you, then they go out of business. Ain't nobody got time to be working all week. Somebody run up in there and rob and take everything that they got. You understand what I'm saying? And then they got to wait for the insurance to pay it off before they can get back on track. They got bills to pay in the meantime, so they ain't taking no shorts. So most of those small businesses, guess what? They had a gun behind the counter. And they meant that. They had signs up there to tell you, don't come in here playing. I'm armed. They had signs up everywhere. But see, Rafi Muhammad, being young like they were 18, but their minds were still, you know what I'm saying, too young to understand how serious it was. Yeah, they knew people that had gotten caught and gone to jail and all of that, but when you in the streets, you always believe that you got a better way of doing the same old things, right? It ain't no right way to do wrong, but everybody in the streets believe it is because they get away with it, and that makes you arrogant. That makes you believe that you understand a little bit better than the other people, so you're smarter, right? Nope, not the case. But this is what happened. Ralph, he liked to use his parents' situation as justification for going out and taking care of the business, right? So he told Muhammad, he said, look, we need to pull this caper because my moms and dad, they need some help on the rent, right? Now, whether that was true or not, Muhammad didn't know. He didn't know, but it pushed him. It made him want to move on that, right? So here's what happened. Check it out. Listen to me now. Muhammad said, where do you want to go try to do this at? Because we got to have time to stake the place out. You know what I'm saying? And when I say stake out, that means they got to watch to see what the movements are. You know what I'm saying? When they come in and get the money, when they taking the money to the bank and all this old kind of stuff, right? You got to watch all that kind of stuff. You don't just run up in no place of being. They might not have no money in the safe. Might not have nothing in the safe. Might not be dumb. And you might hit them on the day where the business is slow, whatever the case may be. So you got to watch. But see, Ralph was one of those individuals, he had a mouthpiece. And he would talk Muhammad into doing a lot of these things. And on this particular occasion, he told Muhammad, look, I done already peeped out. It's this pawn shop down the street. And he gave him the address. He told him where. He said, yeah, I know the spot. He said, man, they stay busy, man. And on Fridays is when they get ready to go take the money that they made all week and deposit it in the bank. Now, keep in mind, let me tell you something. Most businesses don't do that. Not even back in the day. They drop their money off every night. But again, that just shows how little Ralph knew. But the whole scheme is based on the lie anyway. He's trying to make Muhammad believe that I got to help out my family so that they can pay the rent. You know what I'm saying? At the crib they were living in. So Muhammad was more inclined to help his friend because he felt like it was a righteous endeavor. Oh my goodness, here we go with that. Manipulation. So they hit the pawn shop, right? On a Friday afternoon, about 9 o'clock. It has slowed down. They've been bumping all day. People running in and out. You know, on them Fridays, people running in and out of them pawn shops, getting the stuff that they put in pawn throughout the week out. Some people putting stuff in pawn because they do have bills to pay and all this and that, right? And they got to make the ends meet until next week. All that kind of stuff. There's a lot of activity going on. So it is a lot of money in the shop. A lot of money. So they waited. And they waited. And once the sun went down, you know, and the police, they make their rounds through the neighborhood, but they in and out. And they knew exactly how long it was going to be before they came back around. On that part, they did figure out. They had about 15 minutes before the next round from the police. So when the last customer that they saw came out of the pawn shop, they waited a couple of minutes just to see if anybody else was going to come, and they looked up the street and down the street. They didn't see anybody coming. No cars were coming to stop and park right there. So they walked across the street. They went up into the pawn shop, and when they walked up into the pawn shop, as soon as they walked up in there, right before, you know, when the door, you push the door up, they pulled down the mask and said, y'all know what it is. And the owner, he's looking. He's a rough-looking dude, right? Rough-looking dude. Come up in the street, y'all. Ain't used to nobody taking nothing from him. And this ain't his first time somebody running up in there talking about, let me get that. So he don't even hesitate. He don't even hesitate. But see, Ralph was already ready. Ralph didn't have his gun in his pants. He had it already in his hand behind his back. And when the pawn shop owner reached down to grab that double gauge, Ralph raised up and hit him one time. Pow! Dropped him like a sack of potatoes behind the counter, man. He hit the ground hard, y'all. Listen to what I'm telling you. And then both of them ran behind the counter. They see him laying there. His eyes are still wide open, but they see the blood coming out of his chest. He breathing heavy. He breathing so heavy, it's almost like he's coming up off the ground. You know what I'm talking about. He's struggling. He don't know if this is it or not. But this is a big old dude, a big man. Big man. And that's going to be important later on. Just remember that, okay? So he's laying there. So they go through the cash register. They grab all the money. They get all the money, right? Ain't got on no gloves. Ain't got on nobody's gloves. Listen to nobody's gloves. So look, they get up out of there. Well, they heading up out of there. Let me slow down a little bit. They heading up out of there. And they look down at the dude one more time to see if he was all right. They didn't care. They looked down at him. Ralph said he ain't gonna make it. So they both ran. And when they ran, the pawn shop owner, he pulled himself up. And he grabbed that double barrel. And he just pointed at him. They had their backs to him because they were running. They were leaving the place. And he shot it. Pow! Pow! 2 times. Hit Muhammad in the back. Right in the middle of his shoulder blades. And the other shot hit him in the back of his neck. Up at the bottom of his head. Dropped him. Dropped him. Before he hit the ground, he was gone. Ralph stopped in his tracks. Turned around and looked. The owner of the pawn shop, he had the double barrel bent over. He was trying to load it back up. Ralph looked at him and then he looked down at Muhammad and out of fear, he struck out running. It got real. It got real for him. He running. And when he running, his eyes is full of tears and he got this mask on, but he pulls the mask off and now he can't see because he's crying at the same time and he's wondering, what am I going to do now? See, when he ran up in there, he had all of it figured out, but he had nothing figured out. Nothing. He didn't calculate that his best friend in crime would end up face first in the floor of the pawn shop. He didn't calculate any of that. All he was worried about is that how long will it be before the police make their rounds and how much money they had in the machine when they got up in there. He didn't think about what if it goes wrong? What if it goes wrong? What do we do? He didn't think nothing about this man that was trying to build a better life for his family. He didn't think nothing about this man willing to defend his property with his life. Now, the shots are fired in the neighborhood, and so now people are coming out. You feel what I'm saying? Because it's a little business district, you know, but it's not too far from the neighborhood either. So now everybody hear the shots and they wonder what's going on, and they see, some people see anyway, Ralph went in the opposite way, away from his house. He knows enough not to go home, but he also realizes that nobody knows who he is. You see what I'm saying? And he runs home, he got the money, except for the money that Muhammad had on him, still in his pockets, drenched in blood. So he gets home and he hides the money in his closet. And he notices that some of the money is wrinkled up, and for some reason that money that was wrinkled up like that, it made him stop and pause, and in that moment he realized my friend's life wasn't worth this wrinkled up paper. He took the lid of the shoebox and he put it on there and slid it on the top shelf in his closet, and he laid down on his bed and he just cried and he cried and he cried. And then about an hour later, he was still laying there And his mother and his father, they knocked on the door and they said, we need to talk to you, son. And he comes out. And when he comes out, he was so lost in his own thoughts in his room that he didn't even realize that the police had pulled up at the house. Because they didn't have no sirens on or anything like that. They were just coming to question him to see if he knew anything about why Muhammad would have been down at the pawn shop. All right. So when he came out, he saw him. And when he saw him, he bolted. Got on down. Ran. Both of the police officers, they looked at each other. And out of natural instinct and training, they were like, they ran him down. And they caught him. And when they caught him, they asked him, why did you run? Why did you run? We just heard a question. Do you know your friend is dead? He got killed in an armed robbery attempt? And he's looking at him. He's trying to calculate what to say. He don't know if they know or they trying to trick him or what is it going. He said, what's it to me? And the two officers, they looked at that kind of strange. You know, the training is kicking in now. They said, son, is there something that you're not telling us? And he said, I ain't got nothing to say. I want my lawyer. And then one of the officers said, is it a reason that you need a lawyer? And right then and there, they decided that he had something to do with it, or he knew something about it. So they called it in, and the captain told them to place him under arrest, right? They had 48 hours they could hold him, right? They placed him under arrest. He 18, y'all. They drove him back to the house, and they told his parents what had transpired, and his father was adamant that it's no way that my son was doing anything like that. And the police said, we're not sure if he is, but he's acting kind of strange and asking for a lawyer and this and that. We're just going to take him in and question him. And then you can come and get him in a couple of days. We'll release him. So when they took him in, the captain said that the man that they shot was in surgery and it looked like he might make it. They had no description of anybody. Because when they got to the pawn shop, the man was unconscious and Muhammad was dead, still with his mask on. So they didn't really understand what was going on, but they knew that Ralph was acting suspicious. So when the man came to, later on that night, the police were questioning him. And he said it was two people. And they went through everything that happened in detail. In detail. And he told them they went into the cash register, and one of the detectives said, when they put the hands on the cash register, did they have on gloves? And the man said, I don't think so. I don't think so. So they went back down there and they had the forensics people take it and get fingerprints, lift the fingerprints off of the cash register. And they knew that because the pawn shop owner and his two other employees that worked there, that their fingerprints were going to be all over it, but nobody else's fingerprints should be on their cash register. But they found two more sets of prints. One of them matched Muhammad. And when they had put Ralph in custody, they took his fingerprints, and guess what? It was a match, preliminary match. They had to make sure. And the fingerprints man came in and he matched it. He said, it's a dead ringer. So they asked him, he said, when were you in the pawn shop? And I said, I need to see a lawyer. They knew then that they had that guy. So they went back and they questioned the man that was shot, the owner of the pawn shop, and he told them the size, the height, the weight, as best as he could tell them about the two people that robbed the place. And Ralph was fitting the description, but he had on a mask. He couldn't say if it was Ralph for sure. He couldn't say. But lo and behold, like I said, they were in this, it's a business district, but they had some houses a little bit from it. And they went and canvassed the neighborhood, and they said that one of the people that was living in the neighborhood a little bit further down, away from Ralph's house, would happen to be sitting on the porch, and they saw him running by at this particular time, and it was close to the time that the shots were fired in the pawn shop, and then they started to piece the story together. And they told him that they had a witness seeing him run away from the pawn shop, so they asked him, how long had you been at home? And he gave them a story, but then they went and questioned his parents, and his parents told him the exact time that he walked into the door, not knowing that they were helping the police. They were just trying to be honest. And what they concluded was that Ralph had something to do with it. So the detectives, they stayed on him, and they played on his guilt, and they told him, listen to me, your friend is dead. It's time for you to tell the truth. It's time for you to own what you did. It's time for you to own it. And if you want to know what he said, you're going to have to tune in to the next episode, right? Because it's going to get better. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I'm getting so